Inshallah, today we hope to end the talk or the sessions that we've been having about the life of Bilal ibn Rabah, Bilal ibn Rabah, Radhi-Allahu ta'ala anhu. The last narration we went through, we were talking about how Bilal Radhi-Allahu anhu, after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, didn't want to stay in Medina Munawwara any longer because it revived too many memories of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he decided that he's going to leave the city of Medina Munawwara. But Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu needed him to be in Medina Munawwara. Not because there were uprisings taking place all around Arabia, Musaylimah Kazzab, imposters who were rising up against the Khilafah, to the east, to the south, and some people, tribes who completely refused to pay zakah. And there was a massive uprising throughout the Arabian Peninsula. So there was a need for fighters. But that's not why Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu wanted Bilal radiyallahu anhu to stay in Medina Munawwara. There's two reasons why he wanted him to stay in Medina Munawwara. Reason number one, mu'adhin. He was a permanent mu'adhin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam throughout the prophetic era, and he wanted him to continue that responsibility that was given to him by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Second reason was because the Sahaba always took a good meaning from pious company. In other words, if somebody who is pious stays in our company, stays in our city, inshallah, our city will remain protected by the blessings of this person. In fact, it's mentioned about Ali radiallahu anhu that before he went out on a battle during his Khilafah, he would go to the city, Basra, Kufa, and he would go specifically to the houses of the different Sahaba who lived in those cities and said to them that I need you to join me in my battle. But you don't need to fight. I just want you to be there. That's it. You just need to be there. But many of the Sahaba didn't want to take part because on both sides there were Sahaba. And number two, they didn't want to, as Sahaba, since they were Sahaba, they represented the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if they were to take one side or another, then people would take that to mean, okay, according to him, this is the haqq. If there's any other person, a layman, who joins one group or another, one army or another, people aren't going to say anything, that's his own opinion. But if a Sahabi joins, people are going to say, oh, this side is haqq because this Sahabi joined with this group. So they had to be careful in that sense too, because they didn't just represent themselves, they represented the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because people revered them, looked up to them, and knew that they were people who were chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the blessed companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is why Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu wanted to keep Bilal radiyallahu anhu and other Sahaba in the city of Medina Munawwara. Not necessarily to fight, but just to be there. So it mentions in another narration, Sa'id ibn Musayyib rahimahullah narrates, and this narration is more accurate than the narration that we narrated last week because Sa'id ibn Musayyib happens to be the son-in-law of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, but he was very, very close to Bilal radiyallahu anhu, and many of his narrations come from his father-in-law Abu Hurairah, but many of his narrations come from Bilal radiyallahu anhu as well. So, very few, because Bilal didn't narrate a whole lot of hadith. But whatever few there are, many of them are coming through Sa'id ibn Musayyib rahimahullah. So Sa'id ibn Musayyib says that during the Khilafah of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, Bilal radiyallahu anhu packed up his belongings and got ready to leave for Sham. Abu Bakr Siddiq came to his home and he said to him, where are you going? مَا كُنْتُ أَرَاكَ يَا بِلَالْ تَدَعُنَا عَلَى هَذِي الْحَالِ. You're leaving us in this condition. Do you know what's going on? We need you here in the city of Medina Munawwara. لَوْ قَمْتَ مَعَنَا فَأَعَنْتَنَا. If you stay with us, then you can help us and support us. So Bilal radiallahu anhu responds, he says, In kunta, innama a'taqtani lillahi azza wa jal. If you freed me for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fada'ani adhab ilayh. Then leave me alone, I will go. And if you freed me for your own sake, for your own benefit, then you can keep me here. I'll stay wherever you want me to stay or go wherever you want me to go. And of course, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he had only freed Bilal radiallahu anhu and paid whatever his price was to his master because he was doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why he was called by Umar ibn Khattab used to call Bilal radiallahu anhu Sayyiduna. He's our Sayyid. Right? Because the one who freed him himself was a Sayyid. So imagine Bilal radiallahu anhu must have been a bigger Sayyid. So he used to call him Sayyiduna, our Sayyid. So when Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu saw that he was adamant and he was serious, that he just wanted to go no matter what, then Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu realized, I'm not going to be able to hold him back. And then he let him go. Thereafter, he left for Sham, and then he passed away there. We mentioned last week that he did return to Medina Munawwara for a short period because he saw a dream of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asking him to visit him once. So he did visit him once. There's no mention in the riwayat, historical narrations, that he ever visited him again, which means most likely that Bilal radiallahu anhu, after he left Medina Munawwara, he only came back from Sham once to the city of Medina Munawwara. He never came back again. Now, why would you leave the city, the blessed city of Medina Munawwara, regarding which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has made so many du'as, right? Dajjal can't enter Medina Munawwara. No waba or plague or epidemic can destroy the city of Medina Munawwara because of the du'as of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made du'a for the businesses in Medina Munawwara that they get double the profit that is in Makkah Mukarramah. So many du'as for the people of Medina Munawwara and the city itself and anything even associated with it. But the Sahaba Ridwanullahi Majma'in's love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was so intense and so strong that it evoked too many memories for them to stay in Medina Munawwara. That's why actually if you look at the number of Sahaba who passed away in Medina Munawwara after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are not that many. There are many more who passed away in other places. Some passed away in Kufa, some passed away in Basra, some passed away in Makkah Mukarramah, some passed away in Sham. Good number of them passed away in other places. But there are not a whole lot who actually passed away in Medina Munawwara after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. During the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whoever passed away, they were buried in Jannatul Baqi. But after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, most of them just decided to leave. We can't stay here any longer. Good example is Abu Ayyub Ansari radiallahu anhu. Buried where? Istanbul. Right? In Turkey. Way up Anatolia, northwest. Hundreds of miles away. Maybe even 1,000. Wallahu alam how far it is exactly. But a good distance. Once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on a journey. This hadith that I'm narrating to you is called Hadith al-Ta'ris, with the scene, Ta'ris. Ta'ris basically means when you're out on a journey and you start getting tired and you want to camp somewhere, so you spend the night there, that's called Ta'ris. To spend the night somewhere, to camp out somewhere for a little while because you're tired and you just want to rest for a little while. So it's mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on his way to Makkah Mukarramah, one night, he wanted to camp out in a place because he was feeling tired. And it was very late in the night when they reached the place where they wanted to set up their camp. Now, if everybody fell asleep, the likelihood is the later you sleep, the harder it is for you to wake up for Fajr. That's why the hukum in the hadith is, Isha comes, no more talking, go to sleep, so that you can wake up for tahajjud and you can wake up for Fajr Salah. But here, obviously, they were on journey. and they need to reach a certain destination, a certain stop, and it took them a while. Finally, they got there, and it was too late in the night. So now, the fear was, if everybody goes to sleep, no one is going to wake up for Fajr or Tahajjud. So, Bilal Radhi-Allahu anhu was appointed to stay awake so that everyone else can sleep. He'll stay awake. When the time for Fajr comes, he'll wake everyone up and they'll pray their Fajr. It so happened that everybody fell asleep. Bilal Radhi-Allahu anhu decided, okay, I'm going to watch over. And he just leaned against his saddle for a little while. You know, the saddles are placed on the ground. It wasn't on the camel, it was on the ground. And it has a small, as a little back support. So he was leaning against that. And what happens when you lean and you're tired? Right? You start dozing off. That's why we tell people who are memorizing Quran Kareem, the students when they're memorizing Quran, don't lean on the benches. If you lean on the bench, you start dozing off. So you have to be upright, right? And you can't be leaning or resting on anything. That's why there's a very specific way the Hafiz student will sit so that he's not resting on anything anyway, not even on his own body. So we won't allow him to sit this way, cross-legged. Usually they're sitting with one knee up, one on the ground, right? So that keeps them awake, even if they're sleepy. Maybe somebody picked that up from this hadith. So anyways, Bilal Radhi-Allahu anhu, he fell asleep. حَتَّى إِسْتَيْقَظُوا وَقَدْ طَلَعَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الشَّمْسُ. They woke up, but the sun was already above the horizon. وَقَدْ فَزِعُوا. And everybody was, we just missed our Fajr Salah. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not allow anybody to pray their Salatul Fajr yet. Even though the sun had already gone up. So they could pray their Fajr now, the Qadha. Because you can't pray a Salah when the sun is rising, when the sun is at its zenith, midday, and when the sun is setting. But the sun had already risen all the way in the horizon, so it was okay. Tulu' Shams had already taken place, so they could pray their Fajr, but Rasulullah didn't want them to lead their Fajr right now. He said, no, nobody's going to pray Fajr right now. Let's get up and leave from here. So they left. حَتَّى يَخْرُجُوا مِنْ ذَلِكَ الْوَادِ, until they left the valley where they had camped and where they had missed their Fajr Salah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, this is, I believe, a hadith of Bukhari. I'm not sure. He said, إِنَّ هَذَا وَادٍ بِهِ شَيْطَانٍ. This is a wadi that has shaitan in it. That's why we missed our Fajr Salah. Right? فَرَكِبُوا حَتَّى خَرَجُوا مِنْ ذَلِكَ الْوَادِ. They left there, and then Rasulullah ﷺ gave them the order to dismount somewhere else. After they had left the valley, they descended, and then they performed their wudu, and then Rasulullah ﷺ gave Bilal the order to give the adhan. Where were they? In Masjid al-Nabawi? They were on journey, which means that even if you're at a rest area and you decide to give adhan, you can give the adhan then. The general rule that's given is that if you're away from home, you should still try to make your salah as closely as possible to the jama'ah salah. So in a jama'ah salah, you always have adhan and you have iqamah. So if you can do the adhan and if you can do the iqamah, you should. Let's say there's 3 people in your house. Then make sure you do the jama'ah. So you resemble the jama'ah even though you can't join the jama'ah itself. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, not in the masjid, he's out on journey somewhere in the desert. And he's giving Bilal radiallahu anhu the order to give the adhan and then give the iqamah, and then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam led the salah. Now the question is that why did not Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tell the Sahaba to pray their Fajr salah as soon as they got up? Because the ruling is, the general rule that we read from the hadith is, when you find out about a good deed, you should do it right away. If you have a salah that you've missed, you should make the qada up right away. Don't delay it, because we don't know about life or death. So imagine a person dies in that state that he has done qada of his salah. He could be in trouble. He will be in trouble. So one should make haste in trying to make up the qada salah. But here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is actually postponing it and saying, not now, wait. So the reason that some scholars give that for which Rasulullah, the reason some scholars give that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam delayed the Salatul Fajr Jama'ah, even though Tulu' al-Shams had already taken place. Okay, Tulu' al-Shams had already taken place. So there is no karaha, reprehensibility in actually praying the Fajr Qada like that. Is that wherever a sin or a mistake is committed, an act of forgetfulness toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happens, that place takes the effect of that sin. That place takes the effect of that sin. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna hadha wadin bihi shaitan." This is a wadi, a valley that has shaitan. Not just say that shaitan is the one who caused this, but shaitan is attracted to sin. He's attracted to anything that leads to forgetfulness toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we want to leave this place because the effect of our forgetfulness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on this place because we missed our Fajr Salah. So let's move from here, go to another place where there isn't that act of forgetfulness taking place, and let's pray our Salah there. And similarly, the opposite too. If a person does a good deed, the effect of that good deed happens on the place, affects the place where that good deed is done. Okay. In fact, it's mentioned about Abu Bakr Siddiq Radhi-Allahu and Umar ibn Khattab that when they used to pray their sunnah, salawat after their fard, they always used to pray it in different places. Never in the same place where they prayed their obligatory salah. So if they're praying their sunnahs of their dhuhr, they wouldn't pray in the exact same place where they prayed their fard salah. They would move to a different place. Reason number one, because they wanted that area where they prayed their salah to bear witness for them on the Day of Judgment that they had prayed salah there. And number two, because of the barakat that can be gained. The barakat that can be gained by that place for them performing a good deed in that place. Right? So this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the order to delay the salah and pray it at another place. So this is called the Hadith al-Ta'ris. This hadith that I just narrated is from the Muwatta of Imam Malik. It's not in Bukhari, it's in the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Regarding the humility of Bilal radhiyallahu anhu, of course, Bilal radhiyallahu anhu was a great sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the fact that he was the mu'adhin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made him even more famous because everybody didn't have, no one amongst the Sahaba had that responsibility but one or two. And he was the most famous of them. So anytime any person, stranger just came to Medina Munawwara, accepted Islam, they would hear the adhan and they would know who Bilal is. They may not know Abu Bakr or Umar radiyallahu anhu, but they would definitely know who's this person giving the adhan. What is he calling? Oh, Bilal. Oh, he's one of the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So everybody would get to know Bilal radiyallahu anhu one way or another because he was the mu'adhin. So because of that, his name spread far and wide. And people would come and say nice things to him. Oh, you're the Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But remember, we love that, right? Somebody comes to us and says, MashaAllah, awesome, you give such a good talk. No problem, right? Right? We try to be humble, but we can't be because we're not. But the Sahaba naturally could not even tolerate any praise toward themselves. They could not tolerate it. In a way, it even made them nauseous because they knew that all praise is only due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah. This was their yaqeen, kamil yaqeen, that all praise is due to Allah, this person is deceived that he's praising me, thinking I'm the cause. It's really from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they feared that this person is deceived and he's going to lead me into deception too. He's deceived and he's deceiving me, and I start thinking that, yeah, you know what? MashaAllah, I do pretty good. I'm a pretty good person. So it's mentioned, لم يكن يسمع كلمات المدح والثناء توجه. It's mentioned about Bilal radhi-Allahu that he never ever heard anybody uttering words of praise toward him إلا ويحني رأسه ويغض طرفه ويقول وعبراته على وجنتيه تسيل. Whenever anybody praised him or words of praise came to his ears about himself, he would always put his head down and keep his gaze low. And then he would say, these were his words, he would say whenever he would hear words of praise about himself, while tears were flowing down his cheeks. SubhanAllah. When we're full of praise, when we're full of joy, when somebody praises us, they're crying. Right? He would say, إِنَّمَا أَنَا حَبْشِيٌّ كُنْتُ بِالْأَمْسِ عَبْدًا. I'm just a Habshi, an Abyssinian. And yesterday, I was just a slave. And look at all this praise that people are giving me. In other words, he was using this just to remind himself of who he was. Abdan could mean slave, as in he was a slave of somebody, but slave also means a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm just a slave. And these people are praising me. They don't know my reality, who I really am or who I really was. So this was a reminder to himself, for himself, so that he wouldn't be deceived by people. And this is a reminder for us as well. Sometimes we do something really good and people really like it, and then we get praise for it, and that really makes us feel good about ourselves. But sometimes that feeling of goodness about ourselves makes us deceived into thinking that we really are good, that it's really from us, that we really are worthy of praise. And that leads to ujub, vanity. It can lead to arrogance. What are you supposed to do in such situations? Remind yourself of your reality. Who am I really? Who am I really? I'm just a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever abilities I have been given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He can take them from me whenever He wants. Right? When he was on his deathbed, his wife was crying and saying, my husband is going. And Bilal radhi-Allahu was smiling and laughing. He said, Ghadan, tomorrow, nalqal ahibba, I'm going to meet my beloved. Not beloved, beloveds. That is, Muhammadan wa hizbah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his jama'ah. Who's his jama'ah? The Sahaba. So he's happy to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tomorrow. When he goes to the other side, there I will meet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and I'll meet his jama'ah, which he himself happened to be a part of. And then his wife said, Wa Bilala, oh my Bilal is going. He said, Wa faraha, oh happiness, happiness, joy, that tomorrow I'm going to be meeting my beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, at the time of death, we're thinking about our wealth, we're thinking about our children, we're thinking about our homes, we're thinking about, distributing whatever we have or we owned in this world. Before we go, let's get things done, right? The Sahaba were only thinking about one thing: I have to go meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some were very positive about it, like Bilal radhi-Allahu anhu, I'm going to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tomorrow. And there were those like Salman Farsi radhi-Allahu anhu who were like, I have 5 dirham in my bag. How am I going to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? 5 dirham. Like it was literally pennies. But he's worried, how am I going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tomorrow? But still, none of the concerns that we would have when death would come to us. Right? This just tells you their level of taqwa, their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us like the Sahaba Ridwanullahi Majma'in. There's ikhtilaf amongst the historians, when did he pass away? This much is for sure, that he did pass away in Sham. But did he pass away in Dimashq, that is Damascus, or Halb? Halb is, what's the English translation for Halb? Aleppo, right? So either Damascus or Halb, and this is 20th year of the Hijrah. Some say 18, but most likely 20th year of Hijrah. And when he passed away, how old do you think he was? How old do you think he was? He wasn't very old. The Rawaya mentions that he was roughly, bid'ah means anywhere between 63 to 69 years of age. But closer to the early 60s, maybe 63, 64, 65. Now, based on that, you could calculate how old he was when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the prophethood. And since he was one of the first to accept Islam, how old he was when he accepted Islam, right? So, he lived by the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He called people towards the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he died by the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the greatest thing about all Sahaba was that they died in the state that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already proclaimed about them, that they are pleased with Allah and Allah is pleased with them, subhanallah. So they have already been given the stamp of being from the people of Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all Jannatul Firdaus, inshallah. Which Sahabi are we going to talk about from next week? There's one brother who requested that we should start our next sessions about Hamza Radhi-Allahu anhu, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's one option. Are there any others? Please let me know, inshallah. If you have any ideas or any specific Sahabi in mind, then we can always juggle it around and see which one we want to do for next week, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير أحسن الجزاء سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.